And welcome to the Hotkeys podcast. This is the show where we talk about everything pop culture and random in the world. Mick here. What up? Joined by
Landon Browning,
Wil Dobratz,
Colby Chapman,
and David Parker.
Guess what day it is today? The 10th, I guess first. 10th of May.
of October. Winter is upon us.
A couple days ago, or yesterday, I thought it was June.
Wait, really?
I was talking to a customer and telling him a bunch of information, and my mindset was it was June. So I totally threw them off. My bad. Anyway, welcome to the show, guys. I think today we're doing things a little bit differently because none of us had anything else planned or anything happened to us over the week. So Dave prepared a little activity thing.
Dave's going to give a sermon.
Dave's going to be speaking a lot this episode. I know, rare, right? But we're a little bit different. No, Dave wrote a type of historical story thing. Maybe I should just let Dave explain it more. Go ahead, Dave.
Okay, so I just essentially adapted a historical story that I want to read to you guys, and then we can discuss it as we go along. I recently re-listened to a Roman history podcast, essentially from the start of the history of Rome until the collapse of the Roman Empire. So there's a year in there that's really interesting. I mean, there's a lot of things that are interesting, but one year in particular that I find particularly fascinating, and I was like, oh, this would be cool to share with some other people. And so I thought the best way to do that would be to write something that was easily digestible by my friends and possibly fellow listeners. So I thought I could read this to you guys, and then we can discuss it as we go along. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask any questions. But if there's none at the start, then I can go ahead and begin.
Okay.
please proceed.
All right.
Okay.
Regarded as one of, if not the worst Roman emperor, Lucius Aelius Aurelius Commodus, a.k.a. Joaquin Phoenix from The Gladiator, was assassinated on New Year's Eve in the year 192. His death would kick off the aptly named Year of the Five Emperors. Had he died a day later, it would have been called the Year of the Six Emperors. Commodus was strangled by his wrestling partner, being the target of a conspiracy that involved his mistress, his chamberlain, and Quintus Aemilius Laetus, a Praetorian prefect, which is the head of the Praetorian Guard. Do you guys know what the Praetorian Guard is?
Yeah, it's the red suits from Star Wars, right?
Yeah. So, originally an elite unit of bodyguards for Roman generals and other high-ranking officials, the Praetorian Guard transitioned to personal security for Rome's emperors, starting with the first, Gaius Octavius, a.k.a. Caesar Augustus, in 27 BC. To put it simply, the Praetorian Guard was the secret service of Imperial Rome. As a political apparatus, the Praetorian Guard was highly influential in statecraft and imperial succession, and by the end of the 3rd century, it had grown to such a beast that it was altogether more self-serving than Caesar-serving. It would sometimes get to the point that the Praetorian Guard would be directly involved in deciding who sat on the throne, and this is one of those times. Laetus, the prefect, called upon Publius Helvius Pertinax, who was Rome's urban prefect at the time, which is somewhat equivalent of the mayor to Rome. Pertinax was likely aware of the plot to kill Commodus because immediately after the murder, Pertinax was rushed to the Praetorian camp, whereupon he told the guards that he would give them a fat bonus, and they subsequently proclaimed him Emperor of Rome. Commodus had lived a very extravagant lifestyle, so it won't come as a shock to hear that the emperor's reserves suffered greatly because of him. This stuck Pertinax, the new emperor, with the task of trying to fix the financial mess that the previous emperor had left behind. To his credit, he got to working on it pretty quickly, starting with selling many of Commodus's extravagant possessions. But there's a very specific reason I mentioned that promised fat bonus, because the members of the Praetorian Guard were definitely expecting it. Prior to elevation, Pertinax already had gained somewhat of a reputation for greed, selling exemptions from service and military appointments, among other things, and he was called a land shark in reference to some of his mortgage foreclosing practices. He was even pretty stingy with food. From the Historia Augusta, he was ungenerous and rather mean, to the extent of serving half portions of lettuce and artichoke at banquets while a private citizen. Even as emperor,
what you brought me today is worth half portion.
I just thought it was funny that it was that like half portions of like lettuce, like they have to point that out. Even as emperor, if he ever wanted to send friends something from his meal, he would send a couple of scraps or a piece of tripe, occasionally chicken legs. So
That's pretty nice.
I suppose chicken legs were an ungenerous gift. Like it was mentioned in that regard. like it was not a cool thing to send. Regardless, he was an old miser as far as the Praetorian Guard was concerned. So when Pertinax failed to pay even half of the bonus he promised, he sealed his own fate. On March 28th, 193, a group of Praetorian Guardsmen, some sources say up to 300, stormed the palace to confront Pertinax. The emperor ordered Laetus, the same Praetorian prefect who conspired against Commodus, to confront the insubordinate soldiers. Oddly enough, Laetus just went home, being partly, if not completely, responsible for riling up the guard in the first place. At least the prefect was consistent with where his allegiance lie, so which clearly wasn't with whoever was the emperor. Pertinax himself tried to reason with a group of soldiers, giving a prolonged and impassioned speech. It's not certain if he was getting through to the men, and we'll never really know because one soldier decided to throw his spear at the emperor, and it went through his chest, killing him pretty quickly. Proclaimed supreme ruler only 87 days earlier by the very men who killed him, Pertinax was the shortest reigning emperor at the time of his death. And
that's so funny.
And not to spoil too much of the story, but his direct successor is going to take that honor from him.
Oh.
After parading Pertinax's head around Rome on a spike, the Praetorian Guard had a bright idea. Seeing as they resorted to murdering the previous emperor for not paying them enough in their eyes, they decided the best way to ensure that they got a bunch of money was to auction off the empire. So they literally shouted from their camp that they were selling the position of emperor to the highest bidder. Most of the wealthy statesmen actually declined to participate in the bidding. So it actually
smart.
Yes. So it really came down.
Can't wait to see what idiot accepts this position.
It really came down to just two guys. So the current prefect of Rome, who was Pertinax's father-in-law, and Marcus Didius Julianus, the guy whose name I'm telling you, so you know he's the one who wins. Basically, Didius Julianus promised the Praetorian Guard so much money with a giant counter offer to the other guy's bid, which was, I looked up, it's roughly 10 times the amount of what a normal legionnaire would make in a year. So
what is that in U.S. currency?
I don't know. Imagine 10 times what like just a soldier makes, and then a special soldier in Washington, D.C. makes 10 times that amount. Like it was an insane amount of money. So roughly 10 times the amount of a normal legionnaire would make. So the Praetorian Guard stopped the auction and said, okay, that's good enough. Hail Rome's new imperator, Didius Julianus.
Sold to the man up front.
Yeah, exactly. So, having obtained the throne in the most noble of fashion, it came to pass that Emperor Didius Julianus had a long and fruitful reign, right?
No.
Clearly, there was nothing wrong with how all of this played out, right?
I love when a businessman gains power.
So I'd like to ask you guys, do you think this was a bad idea for the Praetorian Guard and a bad idea for Didius Julianus, the guy who bought the empire?
I think it probably works out okay for the guard. Probably not going to work okay for Diddy Kong.
Did you just call him Diddy Kong?
Yeah, Didius Kong.
Didius Julianus, but we can call him Diddy.
Call him Diddy.
Now, do you think it's a good, like, what do you think is going to happen here? Like,
I think he's going to get murdered for not paying them the amount of money they want.
Well, I mean, when I first heard this story, I remember, I think my very first thought was, oh yeah, like, why wouldn't they have done this before? What a brilliant thing to do. You know, you're the Praetorian Guard, you're in this powerful position. Why not take such a huge advantage of your post and do this? Like, why didn't they do this earlier? Can you guys maybe, like, if you were in that position, do you think that would be a smart thing to do?
I mean, I'd kind of, like, I don't know, I like money.
Okay.
You don't. I'm trying to think what the term. You don't let the. I don't know. Like these guys sound like animals.
On one hand, it's like
these guys sound like
mind is like, yeah, I want money. But on the other hand, it's like you're literally letting anybody you want with money come into the most quote powerful end quote position in Rome.
Yeah, but like they can just kill him because like they killed the last two guys. Like, so my thing is like these guys sound like my kind of people.
So what you're saying is that like the Emperor's
I don't think you should let my kind of people run the show because
well,
we're just going to be.
Has to do
is that because you're kind of
all the Emperor
people
has to do is
alcohol?
all the Emperor has to do is make sure that like I don't know how many ever of the Praetorian Guard, right? How many of them are happy? That's all he has to do is keep him happy.
Yeah, but like.
Okay,
but how easy?
I've worked with a lot of animals before, and like you can throw money at them, but like
Wait a
they
minute,
just get unhappy again.
But these guys aren't money motivated. Like Dave has made that very clear.
I've worked places where like money gets thrown around, and then like it's like a couple months later, and then like everybody's like unhappy again.
Yeah, that's true.
And like there's only so
no
much
money will ever be enough.
There's only so much money.
What's behind their motivation? What do they want?
Money.
I don't know what they want because we're all animals. Like, so they're just gonna whoever's at the top, they're just gonna blame.
You're a true philosopher, Landon. You're a true philosopher.
They probably want power. And what do men with power want the most? More power.
Legos. I was gonna say something else.
You say what?
I was gonna say something else.
More power could probably be in there somewhere. That's what you were gonna say.
I think you guys you're thinking about this pretty well from the Praetorian Guard point of view, I would say. For greater context, so this is the late 3rd century Rome. The extent of the empire is still fairly large. It is not the biggest the empire has been. That's already happened, like 100 years earlier.
Starting to crumble.
But the empire is still very strong. It just came off of, before Commodus, it was like 80 years of really good emperors. There was just 5 emperors in like an 80-year period. They was called the 5 good emperors. So Rome essentially was kind of like Commodus ushered in everything bad that happened with the Roman Empire after that period. So
can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
Sorry. So Rome was a republic, correct?
It was a republic. Basically,
so when they had emperors, when you say emperors, they had like 5 and 80 years. So like, was that like a life term? Like if you were emperor, were you emperor for life?
At this point, the republic was dead. Rome had a republic earlier in its life. It wasn't until it was 42 BC or something, around that time, 46 maybe, when Julius Caesar came, crossed the Rubicon. That essentially was like the end of the republic, really. And then his heir, Caesar Augustus, known as Augustus, he was the first like official emperor. And at that point, there was still a Senate of Rome, but it was not a republic at that point.
So was it more like a monarchy then? Back to like
it was an autocracy. It wasn't because he wasn't a monarch. He called himself the first citizen. Which was his way of saying like, oh, I'm one of the people. I'm the first citizen.
It reminds me of when Palpatine creates the Galactic Empire.
No, that's exactly what Star Wars, was influenced by.
Mirrors,
exactly. So,
Roman history.
No, at this point, it is not a republic. There is a Senate, but they are not. They have no power. They essentially are figurehead people at this point. The Senate of Rome lost most of their power in about like 80 BC, and like they diminished from there. But yeah, at this point, it is a full like autocratic system with emperors and all that. So for context, like I said, the empire is still big at this point. Around the rest of the empire, you have legions of soldiers with powerful generals throughout all of the provinces of the Roman Empire. So you guys are thinking good from a Praetorian Guard point of view. What if you were to think from a Roman general point of view who is not in Rome at the time? How does all of this play out? Do you think this was a good thing to happen if you're someone like that, if you're a powerful general?
If I'm one of them generals, I say, where my money at? That's what I say.
Okay, remember, this is the year of the 5 emperors, and right now we're only 2 emperors in. So
yeah, but you already know, like you don't know what you don't know, like you're only at one. This is the second emperor. Okay, the first one was a dud. That's okay. Fool me once, shame on you. We're not the fool me twice yet.
We're almost there.
I'm just saying the Praetorian Guard. They're just a bunch of wild boys, man. Like they're just trying to have a good time. Like,
so, Landon, when you said you don't think this is gonna end poorly for the Praetorian Guard, would you like to change your answer at this point in the story?
No, this is gonna go horribly for both parties.
Are they gonna die happy though? Probably.
No.
I mean, at this point, I could see the generals thinking, why are we taking orders?
Yeah.
What's going on? They're going to go back.
There's only 300 of
They're
them.
going to take back Erebor.
Here's the thing. I think the generals
Rome.
become the new guard. I think they wipe out the old guard and they wipe out the
They're the freaking Jedi in this allegory.
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
They're trying to be
He's a
framed.
general like his father
One of
before
them
him.
already killed the younglings.
Which one is that? Is that the...
Okay, no. The Star Wars analogy works better early Empire. At this point, I don't know if it's super applicable.
No, we can still make this work.
Empire.
Rebels.
They're gonna do the
They're the
Daisy
rebels.
Ridley film will be more like this.
If Joaquin Phoenix was Snoke,
I still need to watch Gladiator.
It's pretty good.
I feel like
I
if
watched,
I was
like,
one of
the
those
first 20
generals,
minutes.
No, we're done.
Decimus
I feel like
Maximus
if I was
Meridius.
one of those generals, I'd be pissed because I would
General
want
of the
my power. It wouldn't be
five
about the
armies.
money; it would be about the power,
okay,
right?
yeah. Shall I continue?
Sure,
All right.
I guess.
Go ahead, Dave.
Herodian.
I have no idea where this is going.
I mean, it's going to be very interesting. I promise.
I
Herodian,
hope he works out.
a contemporary historian of the time, wrote, because he had purchased the empire shamefully, disgracefully, and fraudulently, using force and opposing the wishes of the people,
Force?
the new emperor rightfully feared that the people would be hostile toward him. That is an understatement, by the way. Herodian again said,
why would he think that?
no one shouted the congratulations usually heard when emperors were accompanied by a formal escort. On the contrary, the people stood at a distance, shouting curses and reviling Julianus bitterly for using his wealth to purchase the empire.
Butthole.
So, the people in Rome hated him, clearly, but ultimately, they were the least of his worries. This is when I get to introduce the remaining contenders from the Year of the Five Emperors. Each one is an important general in a different province of the empire. First is Pessinnius Niger in Syria, Claudius Albinus in Britain, and Septimius Severus in Pannonia.
That's such a terrible name.
Pannonia is primarily parts of modern-day Hungary and Croatia, for reference. So each had roughly the same reaction to hearing the news of the new claimant. Scoffing, declaring himself emperor, and making plans to head to Rome to depose and or kill Didius Julianus, a.k.a.
Oh, poor Diddy.
Diddy Kong.
Diddy.
Being the closest... oh, sorry, go ahead.
Once Diddy had all this money, like, the world was, like, pretty terrible back then. Like, and he was already, like... So...
We don't know if he had all this money. He just... promised all this money.
So then he's stupid.
I don't get into it much in this story, but on some of the sources I found, he actually doesn't even pay out what he promised to the Praetorian Guard.
but regardless, he was like an upper. He probably had like a pretty great life for the time. Right?
Yeah, he was a senator, so he was kind of I would say not of necessarily lowly reputation, but he wasn't he was lowly enough to be willing to purchase the empire, and a lot of people were like, I can't do that, that will sully the name of good Rome,
my family, or
which
like get me
clearly
killed. Like,
many people were not cool with. I mean, ultimately, from everything I was reading, the only people who were cool with Didius Julianus were the Praetorian Guard, but no one else anywhere was like, yeah, this is our guy, we like this guy. Because it was seen as such a shameful way, like, to obtain the throne. Like, in the past, people had become emperor by, like, hiring people to kill previous emperors. That people didn't have as much issue with, but purchasing it through an auction, people did not.
Way less badass.
Yeah. So, being the closest geographically, Severus was seen as the biggest threat, and rightfully so. At the head.
Now we're moving over to Harry Potter.
At the head of multiple legions, the Pannonian general was sweeping through the Italian peninsula, beelining to Rome, while gaining overwhelming support along the way and meeting no resistance. It was looking like his only opposition would be the Praetorian Guard, who had little to no experience with warfare and were accustomed only to their corrupt position as nothing but overpaid bodyguards. So
wait. So you're telling me that this Praetorian Guard, that's supposedly the best bodyguards in the entire Rome...
No, they are not the best bodyguards in Rome. They are just
chumps.
The bodyguards of of the emperor. But
wait a minute. I thought the emperor was supposed to be prestigious. This sounds like it's just like I don't know.
They're a bunch
like,
of chumps. They like
chumps.
No combat experience. Yeah. Probably no.
Like anybody can come into Rome and kill everybody. Like I feel like
they're just keyboard warriors.
I mean, their function was to protect the emperor, but not to protect the emperor against the entire empire.
Okay.
So
they're not the Avengers.
And so these generals, real quick question. These generals, right? These 3 generals that are about to storm in and take the throne. So they're in the Roman army, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they are generals of the Roman army in completely different parts of the empire.
Okay, gotcha. I'm tracking now.
Mm-hmm. Didius Julianus
is really bad.
Didius Julianus sent envoys to either recall northern legions. So there were lots of legions throughout the entire empire, like on the Danube River, lots of regions to essentially protect from barbarians from coming over. So he sent envoys to recall them, essentially to be like, hey, come, fight with me against these usurpers who are trying to steal the throne. Or to see if the envoys could slow Severus's advance. But instead, all the envoys he sent just defected and joined Severus's side instead. At some worst suggestions from the emperor, the Senate, seeing the writing on the wall, pronounced Severus as the joint emperor with Didius Julianus. And they sent a Praetorian prefect to him. No. They sent a Praetorian prefect to him to pass on the news. Basically like, hey, just so you know, we, the Senate, decided you're going to be the emperor with Didius Julianus. Are you cool with that?
I bet they killed him.
Severus, seeing the desperation in the gesture and liking his odds, rejected the proposal, and he killed the prefect for good measure. The general sent a counter-proposal to the rest of the Praetorian Guard, which was hand over those responsible for Pertinax's death, or else. The Guard briefly considered or else, but quickly decided against it. So they complied, sending off the guilty to their doom, which did include the prefect Laetus, who finally got his comeuppance after being responsible basically for 2 emperors' deaths. So upon hearing this news, the Senate decided to go all in on Severus, and they declared him sole emperor, stripping the title of Imperator from Didius Julianus.
How long did Didius have it for?
On June 2nd, 193, a couple of senators let a lone soldier into the palace, who promptly hunted down the emperor, former emperor, for going by what the Senate decreed, and killed him. At 66 days, Didius Julianus was now the shortest reigning emperor, and he will hold that honor. Sorry, go ahead.
It's so crazy because they don't have any phones or anything, they don't even have letter. They have letters, but they don't have telegram. And they killed this guy in 2 months.
Information travels fast, I guess, when you purchase an empire.
So Didius Julianus.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Was he the first emperor that was impeached?
I'm not sure. That's a good. Well, at this point, what the Senate said actually meant nothing. It actually held basically no sway or power. So them decreeing him no longer emperor really meant nothing at this point. So
it was just his murder, really.
Yes. He was not the first emperor to get murdered, and he was not the last emperor to get murdered either. So Didius Julianus, he holds that honor of shortest reigning emperor until the year of the 6 emperors, which is in 238. But we're still in the year of the 5 emperors, and we have 2 more to go. To make matters simpler, Severus pretty quickly struck a deal with Claudius Albinus. He was the general in Britain, where the latter effectively became the heir to the former. This left just Pescennius Niger to contend with, and he was eventually defeated in the Battle of Issus. Afterward, he attempted to flee, but was captured, and because he was such a forgiving guy, Severus had Pescennius Niger beheaded, and then all of his children put to death, and his wife murdered. To make matters worse,
what a great time to be alive.
Severus, he reneged on his deal with Claudius Albinus, and instead he named his son Caracalla as his successor instead. This was unacceptable to the British general, so he mustered his legions, and he went to war with Severus, the emperor. And I'll tell you, it works out about as well for him as it does the other half dozen emperors I've mentioned today. Long story short, he winds up dead after the Battle of Lugdunum.
Which one dies?
Claudius Albinus, the British guy. He winds up dead after the Battle of Lugdunum, which apparently was one of the biggest battles in Roman history with like the amount of people. Lugdunum is like modern day, I think, Lyon in France.
How many soldiers were involved?
It was like 200,000, I think, maybe more.
Oh my gosh! And just swords and spears and like catapults. And stuff.
Yeah. So he winds up.
I bet it reeked. I bet it was so gross.
He winds up dead after the Battle of Lugdunum, and the naked body of Claudius Albinus was then trampled by Severus's horse before being beheaded and tossed into the Rhone River. And
people were crazy back then, man. They were so crazy.
And because
they're like their preferred method of killing is beheading. Like it's just like so barbaric.
Yeah. Well, they trampled his dead. He wasn't. No, he didn't. He was dead before they beheaded him. Dave said he was dead, and then they trampled him with his horse just for fun, and then
they beheaded him.
Oh,
yeah. So it was
capture,
killed
him,
death,
then they trampled him,
trampling naked under a horse, beheading, river.
His horse did the gritty on his dead body.
People are crazy.
This is like I feel like this is we live in a more civilized era. Just a bit, though.
No. Don't you remember when Joe Biden cut off Trump's head, trampled his dead body with a Toyota Prius, and then threw him into the Potomac?
Eating his chocolate chip.
I think it's the river that killed him. That finally did it.
Yeah. And because Severus was such a forgiving guy, he decided to pardon Claudius Albinus' wife and sons.
Wait, really?
But almost immediately changed his mind, and then he had them killed, throwing their corpses into the same river as Claudius Albinus.
Well, that was kind of nice of him. Like,
death together in peace. I'm sure they're.
I wonder what made him change his mind. I wonder if he always planned on it, or if like someone said something. Like,
no, I feel like it was a diplomatic move to just say that they were pardoned, and then he always.
But then immediately change your mind.
Yeah,
he's like, you are no, and then he like beheads and then river.
Or he's like, I can't do this. I'm sorry.
Well, wasn't that always the move back then? Because like you didn't want to risk like the kid growing up and like trying to avenge their father or something, right?
Yeah. Like speaking of sons, on a side tangent, so Caracalla, Severus' son, he does become emperor someday, co-ruling with his brother Geta. Though not for long, because Caracalla has his own brother brutally murdered right in front of their mother under the guise of a peace meeting. Like, his brother literally dies in his mother's arms, getting stabbed to death at the behest of his brother.
But wait, this isn't now. This is like way later.
No, this is like 20 years later. So if it wasn't his own brother he killed, his father would have been so proud. Caracalla dies getting stabbed to death while taking a leak, though, so that is kind of funny. But again, that's later. I would like to end.
I'm always afraid of that, actually, especially when we were in Vegas.
It's such a vulnerable place to be.
I'd like to
turn around and pee on him.
Oh gosh, I'd like to end with a final passage from Herodian again about the fate of the rest of the Praetorian Guard after Severus had the ones responsible for Pertinax's assassination put to death. It's kind of long, but it's quite satisfying, especially considering how forgiving we know the emperor can be. Severus sent an open letter to the Praetorian camp, directing the soldiers to leave their weapons behind and come forth unarmed, as was the custom when they escorted the emperor to the sacrifices. He further ordered them to swear the oath of allegiance in his name and to present themselves with good expectations of continuing to serve as the emperor's bodyguard. Trusting these orders, the Praetorians left their arms behind and appeared from the camp in holiday uniform. Arriving at Severus's camp, they sent word that they were at the assembly ground where the emperor had ordered them to muster for a welcoming address. The Praetorians moved toward the emperor as he was mounting to a speaking platform. Then, at a given signal, they were all seized while cheering him in unison. Prior orders had been issued to Severus's soldiers to surround the Praetorians. Severus ordered his troops to hold the Praetorians in a tight ring of steel. When he had them netted in a circle of weapons, the enraged emperor shouted in a loud voice, "You see by what has happened and that we are superior to you in intelligence, in size of army, and in number of supporters. Surely you were easily trapped captured without a struggle. It is in my power to do with you what I wish, when I wish. Helpless, you lie before us now, victims of our might. But if one looks for a punishment equal to the crimes you have committed, it is impossible to find a suitable one. You murdered your revered and benevolent old emperor, the man whom it was your sworn duty to protect. The empire of the Roman people, eternally respected, which our forefathers obtained by their valiant courage, this empire you shamefully and disgracefully sold for silver as if it were your personal property. But you were unable to defend the man whom you yourselves had chosen as emperor. No, you betrayed him like the cowards you are. For these monstrous acts and crimes, you deserve 1,000 deaths. But I will be merciful. I will not butcher you. But I say that it is in no way fit or proper for you to continue to serve as the emperor's bodyguard. You who have violated your oath and stained your hands with the blood of your emperor and fellow Roman, betraying the trust placed in you and the security offered by your protection. Still, compassion leads me to spare your lives, but I order the soldiers who have surrounded you to strip off any military uniform and drive you off naked. And I order you to get yourselves as far from the city of Rome as is humanly possible. And I promise you, and I swear it on solemn oath, and I proclaim it publicly, that if any one of you is found within 100 miles of Rome, he shall pay for it with his head. So I'm kind of conflicted with Severus. Like
it's a great speech, man.
It's a great speech. Like I read that and I was like, I don't want to summarize this. Like I have to just read this word for word because it's like it's so good.
And then he said, "Today is our Independence Day."
So like he does stuff like that, which like it makes perfect sense. Like yes, like like he is so right about the Praetorian Guard. But then there's all the like, you know, beheading women and children thing, and like
that was just a thing back then.
It's a cultural movement, I think.
A cultural movement.
Everybody did that back then. That wasn't like frowned upon back then. Like that was just a thing. Like,
okay,
of course you kill the women and children.
So
no PlayStations back then.
Are we gonna?
What are they gonna do?
So
up to the very end, they still didn't get it. Not until it was truly over. They were undone only by their hubris. Each soldier thought he would get to remain part of the Praetorian Guard after everything they had become. Self-important, out of touch, lackadaisical, but ultimately irrelevant. And after everything they'd done. The plotting, the assassinations, the auction, all of it. They essentially slaughtered... They slaughtered their golden goose, and they paid for it with their livelihoods. And it took Severus's purge and overhaul to ultimately fix the problem of the Praetorian Guard.
So how long was Severus emperor?
Until they killed their next emperor. But that wasn't for another 24 years.
So he was emperor for 24 years?
When they stabbed a guy who was peeing. So
that's when Severus died, or?
I thought Severus's kid was the one that was stabbed to death with.
So did Severus die of natural Severus's causes
kid.
Then?
Yes, he did die of natural causes.
Oh.
So he fixed the Praetorian Guard for about 20 years.
Probably it's not a high bar to clear, but it seems like he's the best emperor so far of the year, Severus.
Well, he's the one that comes out on top. He is the last emperor of the year of the 5 emperors, and then he reigns for like 20 years.
He sounds like a real one. Like he did what he had to do. He did what he had to do.
He got it back. Back.
Essentially, yeah. So, anyway,
one would even maybe say he's a hero.
Some people would. But that is the year. That is the year of the 5 emperors.
Wow.
Great story. I can't believe you wrote all that. I can't believe you made it.
Where'd you come up with it? Clearly, you plagiarized from Star Wars.
Severus's character
Harry
arc,
Potter.
Unmatched and brilliant. That final speech, masterclass in writing.
Oh, who are you going to get
to
cast in these roles?
Oh, I don't know. I think
I like Colby to play Diddy.
I think Will's got real like Pertinax energy going on. You know, like,
oh boy,
he promises a huge bonus, but like then. Oh no, maybe I'm more of a Pertinax.
You're like half blood is for you.
She can win.
Maybe Will's like is Will Claudius Albinus? Like he's like, oh yeah, sure, I'll be second in command, and then I'll just stay over here for a really long time, and then by the time the other person has so much power, he just gets killed.
Yeah, probably.
I'll play the water that all the people are thrown into.
No, Mick, you can be the one that kills Dave, right? You can kill your
Who's
brother.
Dave play?
I'm Pertinax.
Your brother?
So you're late.
So you gotta
the
throw the
prefect.
spear.
Oh, man. I have a good aim.
None of us are Severus because none of us are that crazy about murdering women and children, except for Landon. But
Yeah, Landon actually seemed really on board with that.
It's a different time.
I don't know.
man.
Will's the one that said it was a cultural movement.
I'm just saying. It's probably part of the
Dude,
culture.
I'm just saying. Severus is going for that culture
It doesn't make
victory.
it right. Doesn't make it wrong. I'm just saying that it's a reflection of the time.
I'm just saying doesn't hold up in court, Will.
I'm saying you don't leave loose ends.
Well, I hope you guys found that story as interesting as I did, because the first time I heard that, I was like, wow, this is a very fascinating turn of events.
It'd be so crazy if our politics worked like that here. Like,
Yeah.
It'd be way more interesting, I'll tell you that much. I'd probably be way more involved.
Joe Biden might have been president for 2 days.
Oh. Okay. Well, thank you for listening, everyone. This was a special episode of the Hotkeys podcast where we talk about history.
Special.
Special episode.
Special.
Thank you.
So goodbye, and like the moral lesson from this is to when you become emperor because the previous emperor was murdered for being crazy, just pay them what you promised to pay the Praetorian Guard, and then everything works out.
If he wasn't such a cheapo,
And that really is the reason, because like all of the other people, like Severus in particular, had no problem with Pertinax as emperor, and that was a big reason of him coming to Rome, was to basically have like the sins of Pertinax's death like be paid for. So like I think he was responsible for Pertinax. I think he was deified, which is like, you know, made as like a god after the fact. Like Severus like really wanted that for Pertinax, and then he had a huge issue with the Praetorian Guard and how they overstepped with killing Pertinax.
Cool. I think I'm team Severus. I think he was the good guy in the story.
All right, you heard it here first, folks. Landon, team Severus.
I think the lesson was don't kill women and children.
No. Okay. That was not what Landon said, Colby.
Doesn't seem to also think that, but that's going to be something that I stand with. That's
good stance. Good stance.
I don't know, man.
We'll be back next week for probably a more regular episode, or until maybe Colby will write a fun history story.
Do you guys want to talk about Guardians 3?
We could talk about it really quick, unless you wanted to save it for.
No, I'm kidding. Talk about it later.
Yeah, we can talk about it next week.
Spoiler warning: it was Mick's favorite movie of all time.
Oh, blugga.
All right. Well, thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
So long.
Farewell.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Hotkeys podcast. You can find us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, CastBox, YouTube, and other podcasting platforms. Visit our website, www.hotkeyspodcast.com. Follow us on Twitter at Hotkeys Podcast and join our Facebook group at facebook.com/HKHotkeys. Please like and review us and subscribe to the show on whichever platforms you use. Finally, you can contact us via email at hosts@hotkeyspodcast.com.